Old people shouldn't have money, Kyle said, laughing as he speared another forkful of grilled salmon, his Rolex catching the light like it had something to say. I froze. Fork halfway to my mouth, the steamed broccoli trembling slightly. He was seated across from me at Amanda's long reclaimed oak dining table, polished like a showroom, a table I paid for, in a house I helped her buy. He said it so casually, like it was just another quirky opinion, like pineapple on pizza or whether the earth was flat. I waited for someone to object. Amanda, maybe. She didn't even blink, just poured herself another half glass of Chardonnay and adjusted the cuff of her blazer. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 78 years old. I spent 32 of those years as a librarian at the Hillsborough Public Library, organizing lives into Dewey Decimals, making order out of chaos. I retired 10 years ago, still able to drive, still able to read fine print without glasses. I raised 2 daughters alone after my husband died young, and I never remarried. People asked why. I told them the truth. I was already raising 3 people. I didn't need to raise a 4th. Kyle is Amanda's only child. My grandson, 32, software engineer, lives in Portland, wears white sneakers that cost more than my entire wardrobe. He's always been clever, but somewhere along the line, clever turned into cold, and cold became cruel, wearing a grin. That night, the dining room hummed with polite laughter, wine glasses clinking, candles flickering like nothing had happened, except a line had been crossed, so quietly, so smoothly, that I almost missed it. I watched Kyle reach across the table to grab more mashed potatoes, like he owned the place. His hand grazed the gold ring on his finger, the one passed down from his great-grandfather, not a word of thanks. He wore it like he'd earned it. I thought about the call I got from the bank last month. A routine check, they said, just confirming a few things, but something felt off. I had asked to see my most recent statement, and the teller hesitated just a fraction too long. I brushed it off. Probably a clerical error. Now, with Kyle's voice still echoing in my head, I felt the air shift. The statement wasn't an error. It was a warning. After dinner, everyone drifted into the living room. The kids, Kyle, and his cousin's children pulled out a board game no one really intended to finish. Amanda chatted on the phone near the fireplace, business even on weekends. I excused myself, claiming I was tired. In the guest room, Amanda always prepared for me, tastefully beige, with a throw blanket I'd knitted myself years ago. Folded and placed with surgical precision, at the foot of the bed, I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the floor. Then I opened my purse. The little red notebook was still there. I've kept it for decades, a habit from my librarian days. I logged everything, birthdays, expenses, quotes that moved me. I flipped to the back pages, where I kept my finances scribbled in my slanted cursive. CDs, savings bonds, checking, investments. I'd tallied everything by hand, always cross-referencing the numbers with what I got by mail. Except lately, there hadn't been mail. I picked up my phone, opened the banking app, password invalid. I tried again. The 3rd attempt locked me out. I remember the last time I'd updated that password. 6 months ago, Amanda had been with me. She said the one I was using was too easy. Let me help, she insisted, taking my phone and typing something in. It'll be more secure. I didn't argue. She was always efficient. She always knew better. But now, nothing worked. I called the bank's customer service line. After several layers of automated prompts, I got a person, young, chipper, polite. I gave my full name, social security questions. She paused. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, but you're not listed as a primary on this account. I gripped the phone. That can't be. I opened this account 30 years ago. Ma'am, it appears the ownership was transferred 2 months ago to a joint holder, Amanda Hastings. Amanda, my own daughter. The girl on the phone apologized, offered to send documentation to my email which I couldn't open, because Amanda had also set up my new tablet last Christmas and connected everything under a shared family account. She'd insisted it was easier that way, simpler for everyone, she'd said, like I was a toddler fumbling with sippy cups. I hung up. My hands shook. I thought about calling Marjorie, my younger daughter. She would listen, but I stopped. Myself, not yet. I needed to be sure. I packed my things and returned home that night, telling Amanda I felt a headache coming on. She gave me a cool kiss on the cheek and reminded me to take my vitamins. Kyle didn't even look up from his phone. Back in my own house, small, dusty, full of paperbacks and plants that needed pruning, I went to the old roll-top desk in the den. It creaked when I opened it. I pulled out the last printed bank statement I'd received, dated 5 months ago. It was the last time my name appeared solo at the top. Under it, buried in the drawer, was a sealed envelope I'd tucked away a year ago when I first had the notion something might go sideways. Inside it, a copy of the deed to my house. My name was there, plain as day, but that didn't mean it still was. I opened the drawer further and found my last will, the original. Another copy had gone to Amanda years ago. She'd insisted, "It's just paperwork, Mom, just in case." I'd believed her. I placed everything on the dining table: deed, will, statement, a photo of Kyle on his college graduation day, arms around me, smiling like he loved me. I stared at his smile now. I couldn't recognize it. What had I raised? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I sat in the dark with a flashlight and my notebook, listing everything I could remember. Changes to my account, times Amanda insisted on helping with paperwork, the missing emails, the password changes. I wrote until dawn. When light broke through the curtains, I made coffee. I pulled my savings ledger from the bookshelf. Handwritten, neat, categorized. Something no one could delete or lose. On the last page, I noticed something new. A sticky note I hadn't placed there, just a smiley face, drawn in blue ink. Kyle's handwriting. That's when I knew. They weren't planning to wait for me to die. They were taking it all while I was still breathing, and no one had stopped them. Not Amanda, not Kyle, not even me. Not yet, but I would. I didn't sleep after that dinner. The words Kyle had said rang sharp and unforgiving. Old people shouldn't have money. I'd laughed politely, a reflex more than a response, but that night it echoed like a verdict, not a joke, a belief. And Amanda, my daughter, hadn't even blinked, just topped off her wine and moved the conversation along like nothing had been said at all. At dawn, I was already dressed, blouse ironed, handbag packed with papers. I went to the bank. Mr. Carver, the branch manager, greeted me at the front. We'd exchanged holiday cards for over a decade. Today, his smile faltered the moment he saw me. "I'd like to review my account activity," I said calmly. He took my ID, logged in. His eyebrows drew together. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, but it looks like you're no longer listed as an account holder on this profile." The air stilled. "Excuse me." He turned the screen slightly, careful not to let me see too much. "It appears the account is now under Amanda Hastings and Kyle Hastings." I stared at him, lips dry. "I never authorized that." He nodded slowly. "I understand, but I want documentation," I interrupted. "Printed, with dates. I'll need to check with the primary holders," he said softly. I stood, straightened my jacket. "You do that, and tell them I'm not dead yet." I left without looking back. The wind outside cut through me, but my spine had turned to stone. Amanda didn't pick up her phone. I called again. Nothing. By noon, I was sitting in the reception area of Amanda's office. Her assistant glanced at me like I was someone's lost mother. "She's in meetings all day," she said. "You can leave a message." "I'll wait," I replied. An hour passed. Then another. The receptionist switched out for lunch and came back with a coffee and no questions. At 3 p.m., Amanda finally emerged, polished, distracted. She barely looked at me. "Mom," she said, "why didn't you call ahead?" "I did." She blinked, then smiled like she hadn't heard me. "There was a mix-up at the bank," I said carefully. "They told me I'm not listed on the account anymore." She tilted her head. "Oh, it's a technical issue, just a reorganization. You're still covered." "Covered," I repeated. "What does that mean?" "It's safer this way. For taxes, for everything. Trust me, it's all good." I looked into her face and didn't recognize it. I want it reversed. Her tone changed. "Mom, you don't understand the system. Kyle and I have it under control. You've never worried about money before." "That's because I had access to it." Her smile faded. She adjusted her jacket. "I have a call in 10 minutes. That was the end of it. No apology, no explanation, just a daughter in a rush. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the glass facade of her office glint in the afternoon sun, feeling like someone had quietly removed a floor beneath my feet. I went home and pulled out every document I had: wills, old checkbooks, notes from the estate planner, pages and pages, all signed by me, over decades. But now, None of them meant anything. The phone rang. It was the bank. Mr. Carver again, just confirming. He said that your inquiry will be referred to the current account owners. That's protocol now. I thanked him, hung up, and didn't cry. Instead, I sat down at the desk where I used to catalog library books back when people still needed card catalogs. I pulled out a blank page and wrote everything I could remember about the last few months. There were signs, strange mail I hadn't opened, Kyle asking about my signature just for verification, Amanda setting up online banking for my convenience, but never giving me the login. It had been happening slowly, incrementally, like turning off the lights in a house one bulb at a time. The next morning, I returned to the bank and asked to open a new account. My own name, my own control. I'm sorry, the teller said after typing for a few minutes. There's an alert on your file. We need a letter of authorization from your family for any new accounts. I felt something shift inside me then. Not panic, something colder. I walked outside, into the Oregon drizzle, and sat on a bench facing the street. Across the way, an elderly man walked his dog, who'd pulled up against the rain. I wasn't part of the financial world anymore. I was a liability, an obsolete piece of a system being repurposed without consent. That afternoon, I took the bus to a local legal aid office. I waited 3 hours. A young man with soft eyes and careful words took my story. He listened patiently, then asked, "Do you have power of attorney set up?" "Yes," I said. "Amanda has it." He nodded, gently. "That may be why the bank acted as they did. But you can revoke it." I looked at him. "Can I?" "Need to file the paperwork and possibly undergo a competency evaluation. If they contest it, it could be a legal process." I exhaled. "Let's start." As I left the building, a woman standing by the elevator touched my arm. She looked about 30. I overheard. She said softly, "My grandmother went through the same thing. No one talks about it, but you're not alone." That moment stayed with me. I got home and checked the mailbox. A letter from the credit card company addressed to Amanda, sent to my address. I opened it. It thanked her for updating the authorized user list. My name had been removed. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't watch the news. I sat in the living room with the lamp off and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. Familiar, steady, unlike the rest of my life. I knew then, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a glitch. It was a redefinition of my existence. I was no longer the matriarch, or the provider, or even the respected elder. I was a hurdle, a fading figure in a house no longer mine, and they hadn't even bothered to lie properly. But there was one thing they hadn't considered. I'd spent 30 years organizing a library. You learn a lot cataloging things, patterns, small inconsistencies, how to track who took what and never returned it. I had more than memory. I had records, time-stamped notebooks, copies of emails, voicemails I'd never deleted, and the intuition of a woman who'd watched people for decades, quietly. I didn't know what my next move would be, but I knew this. The story wasn't over. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for someone else to write it. It was the second Sunday of May, a quiet, blue morning in Oregon, the kind where the breeze still smells faintly of rain and magnolia. I had just made my tea chamomile, no honey, and sat by the kitchen window like I always did. That's when I saw the first sign, a white van pulling into the driveway. 2 men jumped out, carrying what looked like camera gear, lights, tripods, wires. Amanda arrived a few minutes later in a pearl-colored SUV. She wore a bright pink suit and sunglasses, and Kyle stepped out from the passenger seat holding a drone. He was all smiles, full of energy, waving to the crew as if he were running a production studio. I hadn't been told anyone was coming. I stepped outside. Amanda greeted me like I was an honored guest, not her mother. She gave me a soft air kiss on the cheek and said, "Surprise, we're filming a special tribute for you, Mom, for Mother's Day." Kyle's idea. I glanced at Kyle. He smirked, holding his camera up to check the framing of the front yard. The lawn had been freshly cut. My rose bushes were blooming, red, yellow, white, the same ones I planted with my late husband nearly 40 years ago. It was the one thing still truly mine, that garden. Yet as the film crew began setting up their angles, not one person asked where I'd like to stand. Amanda clapped her hands. "Let's get some B-roll of Mom walking through the garden. That'll be sweet." So I walked, slowly, through rows of azaleas and iris, pretending not to hear the click of the camera or the low hum of the drone overhead. A young woman from the crew asked me to smile. I did, but inside, it felt hollow. No one had called me that morning just to say Happy Mother's Day. No card, no flowers, no breakfast, only the camera. Later, they asked me to sit on the bench beside the pond. Kyle kneeled down beside me, holding a small mic to his shirt. "Tell us something wise, Grandma. Something about family." I said, "Family is when people remember who you really are." The crew loved it. Amanda nodded, pleased. Kyle even patted my knee like I was a mascot who had done well. After the shoot, Amanda disappeared into the kitchen, giving orders about refreshments. I heard her laugh, that bright, careful laugh she uses with clients. She said something about posting the video with a soft piano track and some nostalgic filters. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat down to rest. That's when I noticed something odd. A file folder was sitting on my writing desk. It wasn't there yesterday. It had Amanda's name on it and was marked urgent, signatures required. I opened it. Inside were several documents, forms from the county assessor's office, a quitclaim deed, and a notarized affidavit. My name was on the original property title, but not on the new one. It had been transferred voluntarily to a trust, one Kyle apparently managed. I hadn't signed anything. Not that I remembered. I checked the date on the notarization. It was 2 weeks ago, the same week I had been in the hospital recovering from a dizzy spell. They'd given me mild sedation for the tests. I remembered that fuzziness, and I remembered Kyle showing up with flowers, hovering by my bed, holding papers, smiling gently. I thought it had been insurance paperwork. There was no need to scream, no point. I sat there, looking at the signature. It was mine, but shaky, the way it looks when I'm drowsy or barely awake. The kind of signature no bank would normally accept. But this wasn't a bank, it was my daughter. I went downstairs, folder in hand. Amanda was talking to the cameraman, laughing about lighting angles. I handed her the folder without a word. She took one look and stiffened. "Mom, where did you get this?" "In my room," I said, "on my desk." She recovered quickly. "That's not supposed to be there. It's just legal housekeeping. You're still living here. Nothing's changing." Kyle stepped in. "Grandma, it's just for tax purposes. You wouldn't want all your hard-earned equity to go to the IRS, would you?" I looked at him, remembering his voice from 2 weeks ago, the gentle tone he used while I lay in the hospital bed. "Just sign here, Grandma. It's nothing complicated." I said nothing. Amanda smiled tightly. "Let's not ruin a lovely day with misunderstandings. We'll go over everything later." I nodded, walked back to the garden bench, and watched them pack up. The drone buzzed overhead again, catching one last shot of me sitting among the roses, serene and silent. They wanted to paint a picture of gratitude and legacy, but what they were really capturing was erasure. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, watching the footage Kyle had left on a USB drive. There I was, smiling in slow motion, walking through the flowers, nodding while Amanda gave a monologue about the sacrifices mothers make. They added a soft instrumental track, piano and strings. It looked like something you'd see in a campaign ad. I turned the volume down and stared at the images. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the old filing cabinet in the hallway closet. I found the backup keys to the safe. Inside were the original deeds, including a photocopy from the year we bought the house in 1972. I also found my will. It was outdated. Time to change that. Then I pulled out something I hadn't touched in years. A dusty cassette recorder from the library where I used to work. It still worked. I clicked it on, checked the tape. It had space, and I began to speak. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. Today is May 12th. I am of sound mind. I did not consent to the transfer of property documented in the folder marked urgent, signatures required. I believe I was misled while under the influence of hospital-administered sedation." I paused, rewound, played it back. Clear. Enough. I placed the cassette player inside the drawer of the end table in the living room, the one everyone ignores. Then I unplugged the USB drive from the TV and put it back where Kyle left it. Let them believe I was touched. Let them think their story worked. The performance would go on, but the curtain, I knew, was already beginning to fall. I stared at the legal pad as Dr. Shaw scribbled in that sharp, blocky handwriting of his. It reminded me of the notes he used to pass me in church choir rehearsals back in the 70s. Brief, blunt, and rarely wrong. He didn't sugarcoat anything. They got your signature while you were still sedated. Eleanor, that's not just unethical. It's close to fraudulent. I didn't answer right away. My hands were folded in my lap, fingers pressed so tight they left red lines in the skin. I remembered that day clearly, noun, the paperwork. But the smell of antiseptic in the hallway, Amanda's voice saying, "Just sign, Mom. It's for your protection," and the way I kept nodding because I couldn't make the words come, was never supposed to notice. "What about Kyle's company?" I asked. "Remember the money I moved for him, the last of Henry's pension fund?" Dr. Shaw reached for a second folder and slid it across to me. Inside were printouts from public business registries, rows of data, business names, board members. One column caught my eye. Ownership, Kyle Whitmore to 100%. That was impossible. Or maybe it wasn't. I had believed him when he said he couldn't qualify for the initial capital without a co-signer. I had given him the funds quietly, even liquidated the long-term bond Henry and I kept for emergencies. It was supposed to be temporary. My name would stay attached until the business stabilized. Only now, it wasn't there. My name had vanished from the paperwork like I'd never been involved at all. I didn't speak for a full minute. The clock behind Dr. Shaw ticked with that old wooden rhythm I remembered from his office back when he still practiced. The only sound in the room. "I sold my insurance for that," I said finally. "He told me they needed the paperwork clean to attract investors. I didn't even ask for shares. I just asked for him to remember." Dr. Shaw said nothing. I stood up slowly. "I need copies of everything." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a flash drive, already scanned. "I thought you might ask." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You always were 3 steps ahead." He walked me to the door. Just before I stepped outside, he said, "You've got 2 paths, Eleanor. You can go in loud, or you can go in quiet. Either way, you're not as alone as you think." I nodded, but I didn't answer. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off, flipping through old recipe cards. I wasn't looking for food. I was looking for handwriting. My own Amanda's. Kyle's from when he was 6 and couldn't spell pumpkin. I touched every inkstroke like it could tether me to something real. Then, I opened my lockbox. Inside was the tiny recorder I'd used once for a book club interview at the library, years ago. It still worked, and it still had a file saved. The label read, May 4th, 2022, home discussion. I didn't remember the details, but I clicked play. The first voice was amandas.com/controlled. "Mom, it's just a few forms. You trust me, right then, Kyle? It's all standard. Everyone does it. Don't worry about reading it, Grandma." And then, my own voice, slurred, slow. "You said I needed ... to rest." Kyle again, softer now. "Just sign, and we'll take care of everything." Klika set the recorder down, heart pounding. I didn't remember hitting record that day. Maybe I was more lucid than they thought. Maybe some part of me didn't trust them after all. I rewound it and played it again, then again. Each time the words etched deeper. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. I peeked through the curtain. It was Tommy, the ups guy from 2 houses down. He waved at me through the window like he always did, cheerful and oblivious to the storm I was about to let loose. I stepped onto the porch. "Tommy," I said, "do you know anything about transferring old cassette recordings to digital?" He blinked. Kinda. "Why?" I smiled. This time, it was real, because I've got a story to preserve, and I think it deserves the best quality possible. That moment standing there on the porch in my slippers, holding a plastic recorder like it was evidence from a crime scene, I felt something click back into place, like I wasn't just drifting anymore. By the next morning, the recording had been copied, backed up, and emailed to 3 separate inboxes I controlled. One of them was an address I hadn't used since I retired, lwhitmore.archive@gmail.com. No one else knew it existed. I printed the transcript and folded it carefully into an envelope marked to be opened if I am declared legally incompetent. Then, I placed it in the same lockbox where Amanda thought I still kept my will. Let her find it, I thought. Let her think she's already won. And while she smiled politely and kept filing papers and planning my transition into managed care, I'd be preparing something else entirely, not revenge. That wasn't the point. This was about correction. This was about memory, because they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't remember. They thought I wouldn't fight. and that was their first mistake. I hadn't touched the answering machine in months. The little red light had been blinking for days, maybe weeks, a relic from another time, a dusty plastic shell sitting on the corner table by the window. Most people let theirs go years ago, but I never did. Not out of stubbornness, habit, really. There was comfort in knowing that someone might call and leave their voice behind, that their words might wait patiently for me, even when no one else did. It started with Marjorie. She stopped by unannounced, holding a bag of groceries and a frown that told me she had been thinking too much. Her eyes kept drifting to the floor as if the linoleum could explain our family's moral erosion. I was clearing out the garage last night, she said, and I found an old flash drive, no label. I plugged it in, and there was a recording. She didn't meet my eyes. It sounded like you and Amanda. My heart stopped just briefly, then carried on like it hadn't missed a beat. She hesitated. You were slurring your words. She was urging you to sign something. Kept saying it was just procedure. You didn't seem ... Well, I didn't need to ask which night. I remembered the hospital, the lights too white, the way my hands couldn't find the strength to hold the pen. I remembered Amanda's voice, syrupy and sharp at once, cutting through the fog of medication, but I'd buried it, chalked it up to a hazy dream, until Marjorie handed me that sliver of proof. I nodded slowly and whispered, it was real. There was silence between us then. No anger, no panic, just an understanding that something irreversible had already happened, and now we had to decide what came next. After Marjorie left, I walked to the answering machine and sat beside it like an old friend. I reached under the table, unhooked a tiny USB port from behind a modification Kyle had helped me install years ago, back when he still called me Nana and smiled without pretense. That little port had become my safe, my vault, my final defense. The audio file was still there. I had transferred it the night Amanda left me dozing on the couch, after she'd walked out with her briefcase full of forged trust. The machine whirred when I pressed play, its tiny speaker crackling with my own voice, confused, trembling. Amanda, I'm not sure I should. And her reply, so sweet and sharp, Mom, it's just to make things easier. I've already handled the hard parts. I winced at the sound of my own compliance. The pen scratching, the shuffle of papers, the silence that followed. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't said no. I'd barely been there at all. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and let it play again. That's when Tommy appeared. I didn't hear him at first. He was standing outside the screen door, a brown parcel tucked under one arm, and a puzzled look on his face. He cleared his throat. Ms. Whitmore, sorry to bother, just your delivery. I nodded and waved him in. He handed me the package, but his eyes stayed on the blinking red light. That thing still works? He asked. I smiled faintly. Better than most people I know. He chuckled, but then paused. You, okay, ma'am. There was a kindness in his voice that cut deeper than I expected. I didn't answer right away. I simply let the machine play once more, Amanda's words filling the silence like a ghost rehearsing her crimes. Tommy's smile faded. Is that your daughter? I nodded. She didn't know you were recording. I shook my head. She didn't care if I remembered. He looked down, then stepped back. You need anything, you holler. All right, I'm around. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and held the flash drive between my fingers like it might bite me. I knew it could burn everything down, and I knew that was the only way to build something honest again. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't storm into Amanda's office with righteous fury. Instead, I slipped the flash drive into an old ceramic sugar jar on the shelf, a jar no one would ever think to open. It had belonged to my mother, and no one in the family even liked it. I labeled the file May_14_convo_backup.mp3 and left it there. It wasn't time yet, not to expose, not to accuse. I wasn't ready to be pitied or protected. I needed to be precise. I needed to remember who I had once been before motherhood made me smaller, a woman who cataloged facts, archived stories, and trusted evidence over emotion. So I began my own quiet investigation. I pulled out old mail, banking statements, even Kyle's startup filings. Late one night, I found the legal template he'd used for shareholder agreements. My name was nowhere, but the transfer date matched the week I had been bedridden, recovering from pneumonia. I remembered signing something then, to dot my hands. trembled as I added that to the folder on my laptop labeled the state, do not touch. I had been reduced, yes. Softened by age, dulled by trust, but not erased. The house creaked under the weight of secrets, and I welcomed it. Let them think I was fading. Let them believe the old woman was harmless and forgetful. That was their mistake, assuming kindness meant weakness, that silence meant surrender. One night, I set a timer to the machine. It would play the recording, once a week, Monday at noon. The volume was low, barely audible unless you knew what to listen for. I wanted it to linger in the air like dust, like something waiting to be noticed. When Amanda came by, all smiles and brunch talk, I watched her glance at the blinking light and quickly look away. She knew, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I smiled sweetly and handed her a slice of banana bread. How's work? I asked. Oh, busy, she said, eyes darting around. Always something. Yes, I nodded. Always something. As she left, her hand brushed the answering machine by accident. It beeped softly. She froze for half a second, then walked out the door. That was the first time I felt it. Not anger, not sadness, power, the quiet kind. The kind that comes not from vengeance, but from knowledge, from choosing when to speak and when to let the truth hum softly through the air, just loud enough to be heard. I didn't know exactly when I'd used the recording, but I knew now the tape wasn't the weapon. I was, and I wasn't done yet. Doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m. I had already been awake for hours. I wasn't reading or gardening or watching the morning news. I was simply sitting by the window, watching the clouds move and the lights stretched long across the driveway. The kind of quiet watching you do when you're preparing to be underestimated. Kyle stood on the porch holding 2 lattes from that overpriced cafe Amanda liked. He wore a blazer, charcoal wool, no tie, and a smile polished to corporate perfection. Morning, Grandma. Thought you could use some caffeine. I let him in. My fingers tightened around the doorknob for just a moment before releasing. He stepped inside like he owned the place, like he'd done it 100 times before, and was entitled to each of those steps. His eyes swept the room quickly. Sofa, fireplace, the bookshelf. A flicker of calculation crossed his face, like he was checking to see whether anything had been moved. You're up early, he said lightly, handing me one of the cups. His voice was smooth, almost kind. Old people don't sleep much, I said, accepting the cup. It was lukewarm. He chuckled like I'd said something charming. I thought we could take a little drive today, just out to Lake Oswego. There's this new place Amanda heard about, high-end, beautiful lake views, organic meals, all that, just a tour. Lake Oswego, I repeated. Fancy. He nodded eagerly. Private patios. They have these soundproof music rooms for personal hobbies. One resident is a retired jazz musician. They do concerts every Thursday. I stared at him. You always were good with brochures, Kyle. He smiled again, this time slower. Look, we just want what's best for you. You know how things have been, the house, the maintenance, your health. I stopped him with one raised hand. Let me get my coat. He looked surprised. He wasn't expecting compliance. He expected some gentle protests, some wrinkled dignity. I could see it in his face, but I just walked away, that as I reached for my coat. The brown wool one with the inside pocket where I'd tucked an envelope weeks ago. I took one long breath. Let them think I was going quietly. Let them believe they'd won. The drive was filled with cheerful small talk. Kyle chatted about the latest developments at his STARTUP partnerships, funding, possibly an acquisition soon. I nodded when Proprian sipped the rest of my coffee, which tasted slightly burnt. The facility sat on a low hill beside the lake, all glass panels and soothing modern curves. It was the kind of place built to look expensive but non-threatening, like an Apple store for old people. The sign out front said Seasons Ridge in those minimalist fonts that scream wealth in whispers. A woman in a soft blue blouse and beige slacks met us at the entrance. She wore a laminated badge and a perpetual smile. Mrs. Whitmore, welcome. We're so happy you came by today. Kyle responded for me. Thanks so much. She's really excited. I didn't correct him. We were led through bright hallways, painted in neutral tones, past clusters of residents chatting or playing card games. The smell of lemon polish and soft linen floated through the air. Everything was clean. Everything was arranged. The woman gave her pitch effortlessly. Here at Seasons Ridge, we believe aging should be celebrated, Residents can choose between garden suites, lakeview apartments, or memory care units, depending on their evolving needs. She said, evolving like it was poetic. Like it wasn't a plan they'd already drafted in legal folders behind my back. Kyle asked questions about the fitness studio, the therapy dogs, the fall alert systems. I let him talk. I listened to every word, every sidelong glance. We were shown a sample apartment. It had a tiny balcony, 2 armchairs, and a kitchenette. On the nightstand was a framed stock photo of a smiling elderly couple. Someone had placed a crocheted blanket over the foot of the bed. Kyle turned to me. It's peaceful, isn't it? I think you'd like the community here. You could still have your books. Maybe even teach one of those memoir classes they offer. I'm sure I'd be a hit, I said softly. He didn't pick up on the tone. Or maybe he chose not to. On the way out, we passed a garden where 2 women were sitting under a sunshade. One of them, tall, thin, with her silver hair pulled into a bun, looked up as I passed. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. Recognition flickered there. I made a mental note. Back in the car, Kyle drove, more slowly. I know this has been a lot, he began. I know Amanda can come across a bit forceful, but this isn't about control. It's about safety. He turned to me briefly. You've been alone a lot, and that house is just not sustainable. I didn't speak. The trees passed by in a blur. Daffodils lined the roadside like they always did this time of year. Everything was blooming. Everything was pretending. After a few minutes, Kyle added, also, Mom talked to a lawyer about maybe setting up a conservatorship, just in case something ever happened. There it was. Not even wrapped in velvet. I looked straight ahead. How thoughtful. She's just trying to make sure you're protected. There are legal things, asset management, medical authorizations. I turned to him then. And once that's in place, who exactly makes those decisions? You. He gave a practiced little shrug. We'd all be involved. Of course. Up to pause, a shift in the air. I asked, have you spoken to Marjorie about any of this? His jaw stiffened just a bit. Marjorie doesn't understand how complicated these things can be. She means well, but she's not exactly great with logistics. I nodded slowly. When we pulled into my driveway, I stayed in the car for a moment, watching the front steps. The light was hitting the garden in a particular way. The lavender bush I planted 10 years ago was still standing strong, maybe stronger than I was supposed to be. Kyle turned off the engine. Just think about it, okay? I turned to him. I already have. He opened his mouth, but I stepped out of the car and walked up the steps. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't need to. Later that evening, Marjorie came by. She looked tired, not because of age, but because of the pressure that comes from standing between 2 forces colliding. She carried a paper bag with Thai food and a bottle of ginger ale. We ate in the kitchen, quietly. Then she asked, you went to that place, didn't you? I nodded. Seasons Ridge. Her eyes met mine. Are you going? I folded my napkin slowly. It's what they want, isn't it? I didn't ask what they want. I asked what you want. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, what I want stopped mattering the day my signature vanished from the deed. Marjorie's lips pressed into a line. I don't agree with them. You know that. I never did. I know, I said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim folder. I talked to Shaw again. There's a way to delay things, maybe even reverse some of what they've done. But you'll have to be the one to initiate it. I took the folder in my hands, read the first page, then closed it. Not yet, I said. She frowned. Why? Because they haven't finished thinking they've won. Marjorie leaned back. She understood more than she said. You're playing a long game. No, I replied. I'm just making sure the next move is the last one. She reached over and covered my hand with hers. Outside, the sky was darkening. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere in the house, the old answering machine clicked on, a mechanical reminder that time didn't stop, even if people did. I listened to it hum, and I smiled. They thought they were sending me away. They had no idea I was already gone, just not in the way they'd hoped. The scent of antiseptic was the first thing that greeted me when I stepped into Maple Hollow. Not unpleasant, but sterile-like, a place to clean to hold anything alive for long. Kyle walked ahead, chatting with the intake coordinator as if he were touring a college campus, hands in his pockets, relaxed, triumphant. I shuffled behind him slowly, nodding politely at the woman with the clipboard who kept using words like gold tier suite. and customized meal plan as if this were a retirement cruise. The room was larger than I expected. Sunlight streamed in through big windows that overlooked a patch of ornamental grass, waving uselessly in the breeze. They'd placed a vase of fake hydrangeas on the side table. Kyle picked one up and smiled like he was proud of it. "See? Not so bad," he said. I nodded. Not bad at all. Marjorie had called me the night before, whispering through clenched teeth. She'd seen the papers. Amanda had filed for full conservatorship. They'd used my so-called willing relocation to Maple Hollow as evidence that I was no longer capable of independent living. They wanted everything signed, sealed, and locked under Kyle's management by the end of the month. But I didn't tell Marjorie what I'd already done. Vivian found me on the second day. I was sitting near the bird feeder by the window in the common area, pretending to enjoy the view. She rolled her wheelchair beside me with the casual grace of someone who'd long accepted the floor as her horizon. Her face was like carved leather, lined deep, dignified. "You're the new one," she said. I smiled. "And you've been here a while, long enough to know when someone's been deposited like a check." She squinted at me. "You're not senile. You're planning something." I didn't answer. She nodded approvingly. "Good. They took my house 6 years ago. My son got me to sign it over during my chemo, said it was for estate simplification. Next thing I know, he's renting it out on Airbnb while I'm watching reruns in here." I turned to her fully. "Did you fight it?" "Tried. Too late. My signature was real. Doesn't matter what I remember. It only matters what's on paper." She looked at me. "Don't wait too long. You still have your name. Use it." That night, I lay awake in the small, spotless bed and remembered the first check I ever wrote. It was 1968. I'd opened a joint savings account with my husband and bought our first washer-dryer set with a down payment of $114. We watched it spin like it was a miracle. Now I was a liability to be managed. The next morning, one requested access to the facility's computer room. A young nurse, Jessica, bright and gentle, walked me down and helped log me in. I told her I was researching classical music programs for seniors. She smiled and said, "Let me know if you need help. You remind me of my grandmother." I thanked her. I didn't need help. I had memorized every step of the transfer days ago. The trust was still technically under Amanda's guardianship, pending court approval. But what they didn't anticipate was the secondary trust created over 2 years ago, when Dr. Shaw first warned me this might happen. A shadow trust, legally structured, unannounced. The funds I had kept apart, small dividends, life insurance returns, and the lump sum payout from my retirement savings that I had never declared to my daughters. It had been enough to matter, enough to protect someone. On the screen, I typed the organization's name: Safi Support, Alliance for Elder Women, founded by a small group of retired attorneys and social workers. One of their initiatives was protecting assets for women experiencing financial coercion from family. They had a donation program. I initiated the transfer. All of it. It took 23 minutes to fill out the paperwork, another 7 to verify, by phone with the organization's director. I used the mobile number Shaw had given me. The woman on the other end asked only one question. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you doing this by your own free will?" "I am." She paused. "Then we thank you. No one will know until you want them to." After the call, I closed the browser, deleted the history, cleared the cache. Old librarian habits. I walked back to the garden room and sat beside Vivian again. The wind was stronger today, bending the metal wind chime outside so it sang in strange, broken notes. She looked at me. "You did it, didn't you?" I didn't reply. She grinned. "You'll sleep better now." I did. That night, I slept harder than I had in weeks. The staff was kind here, and the food was warm, but it wasn't home. I wasn't meant to stay long. I'd made myself temporary. A shadow in the hallway, polite, present, forgettable. On the 4th day, I called Marjorie. She was crying before I said a word. "They're changing the locks at your house." "I know. They're moving your clothes." I expected that. There was silence on the line. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she finally whispered. "I can't stop them legally." "Not unless you don't have to stop them," I said. I already did. The next morning, I asked Jessica for help scanning a handwritten letter. I told her it was for an old friend who didn't like email. While she printed the page, I added the final line in ink. Everything they took wasn't mine anymore. She smiled as she handed it back. "Do you want me to mail it?" "No," I said. "I'll deliver it in person." Later that day, I sat in the craft room with Vivian, while others painted ceramic mugs. She was sorting buttons into cup trays. She looked up and said, "What happens now?" "I disappear," I said. "Where will you go?" I shrugged. "Where they won't find me until I want to be found." She paused. "You remind me of who I was before I gave up." "I remind myself of someone too," I said. "And who's that?" "The woman I forgot I could be." Vivian reached over and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin but strong. "You'll come back maybe," I said. "Maybe not." That night I folded the clothes I'd brought just enough to seem like I'd settled. I left a small envelope under my pillow. It contained a list of charities. Safety was circled out by morning. I was gone. No cameras, no shouting, no confrontation. Just a blank bed, a drawn curtain, and a woman who finally took back what they thought she'd lost. Her name, her will, her voice. They wouldn't know for days, and by then, I'd already be somewhere else, somewhere quiet, where old women weren't forgotten or erased, where we didn't become footnotes in someone else's legacy. Where we rewrote the endings ourselves. I stood by the window in my room at Ashridge Oaks, watching the wind move through the birch trees. The sky was cloudless, clean, the kind of day that tries to make you forget anything could go wrong. But I remembered everything. On the small table behind me, the speakerphone waited. Alongside it, a plain notepad, the brass pen Dr. Shaw liked to carry, and one sealed envelope. I had no photos, no keepsakes. I wanted it bare. At 2:59 p.m., I sat down. At 3 o'clock sharp, I pressed the button. "Dr. Winston Shaw here. Marjorie Whitmore," my daughter said, her voice tight, cautious. "This is Helen Lacey, representing the Women's Financial Justice Fund. Joanna Keller, personal counsel for Ms. Whitmore." I took a breath and didn't let it linger. "I'm not here to contest anything. I'm here to document a decision already made." No one spoke. Dr. Shaw broke the silence. "Eleanor, as of this morning, the full restructuring has been executed. The original trust is dissolved. The assets are now allocated per your new instruction, legal and irreversible, and the transfer to the Women's Fund." Helen responded, "Com, steady, completed, anonymous, per your request. No names were listed. It's being held in a blind fund until distribution begins next quarter." "Good." I uncapped the pen. My hand didn't shake. Joanna cleared her throat. "If you'd like to review the signature protocol, I'm ready." I signed 3 documents. Once each. Dr. Shaw continued. "Additionally, your primary residence has been reclaimed under estate correction. The irregularities in the previous transfers signed during a medically altered state granted us leverage. The deed is no longer under Kyle Whitmore's name." I didn't answer. The silence on the line wasn't awkward. It was clean. Marjorie's voice came next. Softer. "Mom, are you sure this is what you want?" I looked out the window again. The birch trees still danced, soft and oblivious. "Yes," not a whisper. A sentence. Helen continued. "In compliance with your decision, the Women's Fund will begin using the assets to seed protection programs for elderly women targeted by financial coercion, starting here in Oregon." That part mattered. "Understood," I said. I slid the documents back into the envelope, taped it shut. "No drama." Marjorie spoke again, and this time her voice cracked. "Mom, I didn't know everything. Amanda and Kyle, you didn't ask." I said. There was a pause. "I know. It wasn't cruel. Just true." I turned off the speakerphone. The room was quiet again, except for the soft tick of the wall clock. That evening, I wrote 2 letters, one to Amanda, one to Kyle. I didn't rant. I didn't explain. Each letter held only one line: "To have had everything and chosen nothing, that was your choice." I sealed them in plain white envelopes, no return address. The next morning, I hand-delivered them. Amanda's slid under her polished front door. Kyle's dropped into his co-working mailbox downtown. No one saw me. I wore gray, not black. This wasn't a funeral. Then I returned to Ashridge Oaks, not the one they picked, the one I had chosen weeks ago under a different name, using the last of my untouched pension account. Vivian was in the garden, trimming basil. She looked up as I passed through the gate. "They think you're broken," she said. I smiled. "Let them." She kept snipping. "Is it done?" "It's just starting." We sat in silence under the arbor. Bees worked around us. Somewhere inside, someone was playing Billie Holiday through an open window. "I'll be seeing you." No calls came that day, or the next. On the 3rd morning, it happened. A quiet feature in the Oregonian. Elderly woman donates entire estate to Women's Protection Fund. Small headline. Black and white photo me, standing outside the house I no longer owned. I watched the news segment from the community lounge, surrounded by other residents. They had no idea it was me. And I didn't tell them. No tears. No applause. Just the soft click of a chess clock in the corner, where two retired engineers were deep in thought. I imagined Amanda reading the article. I imagined Kyle trying to access his startup accounts, then his inbox, then his investment app. I imagined the slow realization unraveling like a pulled thread. Let them sit with it. Let them look for a number that no longer existed. Let them try to explain a loss with no visible thief. Because I hadn't taken anything from them. I'd simply removed myself. Later that afternoon, Marjorie called. I didn't answer. She sent one message. I understand now. I hope you're at peace. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because I had nothing left to say. They'd spoken for me long enough. Now the silence would speak instead. That night, I took the elevator up to the top floor. Vivian was already there, watering her lemon balm. I handed her the newspaper clipping. She studied it. You wanted them to know. No, I said. I wanted them to never forget. She folded the paper carefully, then tucked it into her sweater pocket. I hope one of them still remembers your favorite flower. I hope one of them stops pretending they forgot who raised them. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. I was no longer a name on a checkbook, no longer a placeholder in a staged family video, no longer a mother, a fool, or a ghost in my own house. I was just Eleanor Whitmore, and for the first time in years, that was enough. I didn't leave a message, not really. I left absence. And in this family, absence rings louder than any voice. Amanda received the notification at 6:42 a.m. Her assistant forwarded it, not knowing what it meant. An automated update from the County Property Records Office. Transfer recorded. Whitmore residence gives Evergreen Women's Trust. She stared at it twice before realizing no dispute, no claim, just gone. A second email hit a moment later. Kyle Whitmore has been removed as authorized signatory on Vanguard Startup Portfolio. Amanda stood up from her desk, knocking over her coffee. It soaked the corner of her framed Mother's Day post. She didn't notice. Kyle saw the fallout before the email even landed. His company's accountant pinged him with a single line. Did you authorize asset freeze from LS Holdings? LS. He paused. Long stem. His grandma's roses. The fake holding company. He called Marjorie. She knew, was all, Marjorie said. She always knew. At the assisted living center, I walked out into the garden with Vivian. The hydrangeas were coming in strong, blue, like the ones Kyle used to pick for me when he was still small and kind. It worked, Vivian asked. I nodded. She smiled like someone who had once been fooled and was glad someone else wasn't. I hadn't left a single item to Amanda or Kyle, but I didn't disown them. I didn't curse them. I simply redirected the current. The house went to a trust that supports older women who've been stripped of their autonomy. My bank accounts were liquidated into a silent fund. One Marjorie helped form years ago, never knowing who it would protect. She came to visit, 2 days after the calls. Was it revenge? She asked quietly, sitting across from me. No, I said, it was record-keeping. Amanda didn't return home that night. She drove aimlessly through suburban streets, radio off, phone on silent. At a red light, she saw a sign for an estate planning seminar at the community center. Protect your legacy. She laughed, not bitterly, just flat. She thought about calling Kyle again. But what would she say? Mom beat us. No, that wasn't it. Eleanor hadn't beaten anyone. She had simply stepped out of the game. By the time Amanda reached her driveway, dawn was breaking. A robin perched on her mailbox. She sat there until the bird flew away, then went inside and shut the blinds. She would tell no one. There was no press release, no court ruling, just silence. At Kyle's startup, the vacuum left by Eleanor's vanished investment spread fast. His co-founder called an emergency board meeting. The numbers didn't lie. Eleanor had been their anchor investor, albeit discreetly. Worse, she hadn't just withdrawn. She had invalidated his entire leverage. Venture capitalists circled, but not to invest, to acquire. Kyle found himself negotiating terms for a company he had once called his vision. He lost his seat on the board within a month. They called it restructuring. He called it silence. Marjorie. Visited the garden, Eleanor's garden. The house now belonged to the charity. Marjorie had been granted visitation rights, a detail quietly buried in the new deed, signed by Eleanor weeks earlier. The roses were blooming. Nobody had touched them since Eleanor left, but somehow they had survived. She bent down, touched the soil dot, and found a small note, laminated and half buried under a stone. It read, "Roots, remember." She didn't know if it was meant for her, but she folded it into her wallet, quietly. At Ushridge I found new routines: morning tea with Vivian, afternoon puzzles, long walks along the perimeter hedges. I wore cardigans again, not because I was cold, but because they had pockets for letters. The foundations sent updates weekly. A woman in Vermont, saved from eviction, a widow in Texas, protected from her son's fraudulent guardianship. I read each one, then filed them away, not as victories, just as balance. A lifetime ledger, finally settling. People ask me, sometimes, what changed? Why now? Why after so many years? It wasn't one moment, it was many. A hallway too quiet, a birthday forgotten, a joke made at your expense, and everyone laughs because no one thinks you're listening. That's how it begins, not with betrayal, but with invisibility. I don't think Amanda and Kyle are evil. I think they're tired of pretending I matter. That's what age does. It doesn't make you weaker. It just gives other people an excuse to stop looking you in the eye. So I made a decision. I stopped asking, stopped waiting, stopped giving away pieces of myself just to earn a seat at a table I paid for. They said I was old. I said I was done. It wasn't revenge. I don't care if they learn their lesson. This was mine. My lesson was simple. Money is not power, but used right, it protects your name when your voice can't. Love is not loyalty, but loyalty is the quiet shape love takes when no one is watching. And freedom is not walking away. It's being able to, and choosing when. I don't hate Amanda or Kyle, but I hope one day, when someone erases them from their own story, they remember the ink it took to restore mine. I am not a victim. I am not a hero. I am just someone who woke up before it was too late and chose to be seen again. 2. Those watching, who feel your name is no longer your own, listen to me. You are still here. They may have the passwords, but you have the memory. They may own the locks, but you have the map. Don't burn the house down. Just take the deed and leave. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and alone doesn't mean lost. You are not what they say when you're not in the room. You are what you remember, and protect in silence. That's enough. Now go write your ending. And if you'd like to walk with me again, subscribe. We're not done yet.